The old military jeep.
Fort Stevens. There.
First, on the way into Fort Stevens, we see the old Civil War fort, which was mainly made of earth. Some big guns sat idle on the way in. Then the foundations sat weathering away in the weather of the North Oregon coast. These are where the soldiers lived that were defending the mouth of the Columbia River. There were row after row of these little houses. There must have been a whole lot of people stationed here. Right behind the building where we saw all these rows of houses, there were some more big guns. Some of these were the guns used that were actually used here, and others are reproductions of them. Either way, these guns look plenty big. Since we're here, we decided to go on in the museum, and here's a Confederate soldier in front of some cannonballs. The cannonballs were the size of bowling balls. They sure should go a long ways and make a big splash when they hit the river. Yeah. And that was Civil War?
That was during the Civil War era, yes.
Yeah. In this Civil War uniform? There's a row of soldiers, all with different uniforms from different periods of time, different wars, and some of the rifles that they would have carried during the war that they were in. There are newspaper articles and actually some other written things with actual photographs of the craters made by the submarine when it shelled the coast of Oregon. Looks like Marge is a Yankee by heart and picked her up a Civil War soldier.
Shells from Japanese submarine leaves scars but no damage on Oregon coast.
The articles from the Oregonian newspaper.
Target of Jap submarines' guns. And it says, shells from Japanese submarine leave scars but no damage on Oregon coast.
A 155 millimeter cannon stands idle now in a little garden area at the fort overlooking the battery.
Fort Stevens. Clatsop people controlled trade on this side of the lower Columbia River for generations. Visitors described the Clatsop bustling communities. The Hudson's Bay Company attacked a village here in 1829, believing untrue rumors of Clatsop hostility. Settlers soon began claiming nearby lands. Clatsop chiefs signed a treaty with the U.S. in 1851, reserving land, but the U.S. Senate never ratified the treaty. The 1855 Oregon Coast Treaty was also unratified, but reservations were created for coastal tribes. Fort Stevens began in 1863 as a Civil War fortification. A Japanese submarine shelling of Fort Stevens was the only World War II attack on a U.S. mainland military installation.
Now we'll walk over and take a look at the gun emplacements. Some of the old metal doors, although red with rust, still are on this fort. They weren't scrapped out apparently. And also the windows are still intact. It looks as though this part of the fort is still intact. Still bars on the windows and the steel doors are still on. Looks like it would have been pretty difficult to get in here had there been an invasion. It sure looks as if it took a lot of concrete and steel to build this fort. And there it is, one of the guns. I understand this gun is a reproduction though, but still, it's probably built just like the original was.
Yep.
It's mounted on many rollers, so would make it easy to swing it around like if you were trying to shoot at a moving ship.
This must have been the mechanism
Boy, that's a big gun.
to turn the big gun. Those hydraulic arms must be for maybe raising and lowering it, and also recoil.
How big that was? What's over there in that yellow building? To the right.
The big shells were loaded from the breech of this gun. These heavy guns could be kept down below the rim of the fort and then raised when they're ready to fire so they're not in sight.
There. See?
Now take a hold of the wheels right behind you.
This?
Yeah,
Like this?
yeah.
And what will this do?
It turns it and raises and lowers it, but it's not hooked up now.
Lowers it. Huh?
Yeah. This must have been to roll the big shells out.
Unbelievable when that thing is-
There's a whole lot of these turrets as you walk along, just one right after another. I didn't count them, but there were sure a lot of them. Some are open so you can go in, and others aren't. But what a sight. And then, of course, there's a parade route out in front. These are they've got a chain along the front of them to keep people out. They claim they might not be safe. And there's a little observation tower where the head sergeant can stand up there and tell you where you're hitting. There was, of course, practice went on. They had to practice constantly to keep in shape and to figure out where these guns hit. Up on top, we can look out over the Columbia River, the area where these big guns were defending, and you can still see the river, although a few trees are growing up there. I'm sure they weren't there at the time they were using these guns. As we walk along the top, we can look down on some of these tourists, and there's one every little ways here, so there must have been a lot of guns here. I'll bet when they fired one of those big guns, the noise had to be deafening, and I don't know whether they had any kind of ear protection at that time or not, but I certainly hope they did. There's several of these observation towers up on top where you could check and see where you're hitting. And we look out over the Columbia River, and here comes a boat by. Then we go up on top and look at the big gun from up above. And then it's time for us to head out. We go past some of the old barracks and storage rooms, just a lot of them, and some of the buildings are getting in kind of bad shape. There are a few of them where the roof is pretty much gone. The concrete buildings seem to be standing pretty well, but the frame buildings don't look like they're faring as well. This one looks like it's going to have to have a new roof, and right away. Once the roof goes on the building doesn't have much more time for this life.